So picture this. It's the summer of 1999, and the legendary horror author Stephen King is out for an afternoon walk.
Right, just a normal walk.
Exactly. He's on this quiet, winding country road near his summer home in rural Maine, and he's just cresting a hill when a man driving a Dodge van, who was distracted by, of all things, an unruly Rottweiler in the back seat, completely loses control of the vehicle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the van veers off the pavement and strikes King at nearly 50 miles per hour. I mean, the impact was so violent that he was thrown over the windshield, launched like 14 feet into the air, and then he crashed into a rocky ditch.
Which is just horrifying. The injuries must have been massive.
Catastrophic. We're talking a collapsed lung, multiple devastating fractures to his right leg and hip, broken ribs, and this severe scalp laceration. By all medical accounts, he was hovering right on the razor's edge of death. But here's the hook. Much later, after he had survived the surgeries and, the agonizing initial recovery, an interviewer asked him a really profound question. They asked what he was thinking in those quiet, terrifying moments when he fully realized he could have died on that dirt road.
And you'd expect anger, right?
Or terror.
Exactly. But his one-word answer wasn't about the terror of the impact. It wasn't about a burning righteous anger at this distracted driver. His answer was simply gratitude.
Which is an absolutely stunning psychological response when you, really pause to consider the context of his life and his work.
Totally.
I mean, here's a man whose entire literary empire, his entire creative framework is built on exploring the darker, more fearful, terrifying, and chaotic sides of human existence.
Right, the master of horror.
Exactly. Furthermore, in his personal life, he is an avowedly non-religious individual. Yet, in that specific visceral moment of profound physical trauma, his brain didn't default to victimhood. He perceived the presence of goodness in the outcome.
He really did. He even went on record later saying of the driver, "It's God's grace that he isn't responsible for my death." I mean, he found a way to be thankful for the man who nearly killed him simply because the man was spared the burden of being a murderer.
It completely reframes how you look at the human capacity for resilience. And that's exactly why we are here today. So welcome to the Book Nook.
Welcome, everyone.
If you're joining our community for the first time, this is our dedicated space for exploring the most impactful, transformative books in personal growth, psychology, and spirituality. We read the heavy hitters, we pull out the insights, and we figure out how to actually apply them to our everyday lives.
Yeah, taking all that dense research and making it usable.
Exactly. So today, we're taking a deep dive into the source material of a truly groundbreaking text. It's called Thanks: How the New Science of Gratitude Can Make You Happier, by Dr. Robert A. Emmons.
And it is a remarkable piece of research. What Dr. Emmons has done is take an emotion that we often treat as a superficial pleasantry and subject it to rigorous, peer-reviewed scientific scrutiny. Today's deep dive is going to explore how gratitude frequently appears in the most unlikely of circumstances.
Right.
And we're going to look deeply at not just what gratitude is on a surface level, but the exact biological and psychological mechanisms through which it physically changes us.
Yeah, so our mission today is to extract those transformative nuggets of insight from Dr. Emmons' research and prove to you, the listener, that gratitude isn't just polite behavior.
No, not at all.
It is far from the obligatory thank you note your mom forced you to write to your aunt when you were 7 years old. It is a scientifically validated survival skill, and perhaps the only legitimate shortcut to genuine happiness that neuroscience has found.
A literal biological shortcut.
Exactly. But before we can understand how gratitude literally rewires our biology, we have to establish a working definition, right? We need to scrape away the Hallmark card veneer. So let's look at how the text actually deconstructs this concept.
Well, from a clinical perspective, gratitude defies easy classification. Like, is it an emotion? Is it a mood? A personality trait?
Right, it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Dr. Emmons argues it can be all of those. But at its core, the experience of gratitude strictly requires two distinct stages of cognitive processing.
Okay, lay them out for us.
So stage one is the active acknowledgement that goodness exists in your life. It's a fundamental affirmation that despite the chaos and the suffering in the world, your life has elements that make it worth living.
Okay, so just seeing the good.
Right. You are consciously recognizing that you have received something that gratifies you, whether that's a tangible gift, a moment of peace, or simply, the breath in your lungs.
And then the second stage is where it gets really specific, right? Because you have to recognize that the source of this goodness lies, at least partially, outside of yourself.
That is the crucial differentiator. The
Mm.
object of true gratitude is always other-directed. You can be immensely proud of yourself for accomplishing a goal. You can be pleased with your own discipline, but you cannot be grateful to yourself. Dr. Emmons actually jokes in the book about treating himself to this lavish room service dinner at a hotel. But even in that scenario, he notes that he doesn't give thanks to himself.
Right. He's thanking the people who made it happen.
Exactly. The thanks are directed outward to the chef, the farmer, the person delivering the tray. Gratitude requires a willingness to recognize that you are the beneficiary of someone else's intentional action, and that what they gave you has inherent value.
Okay, let's unpack this active recognition you're talking about. Because if you were listening to this while, doing the dishes or driving to work, you might be thinking, isn't gratitude just a passive feeling of relief? Or just simple social politeness?
A lot of people think that, yeah.
Like someone holds the elevator door, you nod, you say thanks, and you immediately forget about it. But if politeness is essentially just a passive mirror that reflects the baseline social norms of our culture, it sounds like what Dr. Emmons is describing is more like an active lens.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, a lens that requires effort to focus. But once you twist it, it refocuses your entire perception of reality.
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it. The text makes it abundantly clear that gratitude is not for the intellectually lethargic. It demands intense mental effort.
It's hard work.
It really is. In fact, Dr. Emmons pulls from the philosopher Martin Heidegger, who famously noted that the German words for thinking and thanking share a deep etymological root.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. Heidegger often said, thinking is thanking. The act of giving thanks belongs fundamentally to the realm of deep contemplative thought.
So it's not just a reflex, it's an actual cognitive process.
It is entirely cognitive. And if you look at the French language, the mechanics of this become even more revealing. The French word for gratitude is reconnaissance.
Wait, like military reconnaissance?
It shares the exact same root. And what do you do in military reconnaissance? You actively inspect, you explore, you scout a territory to gather vital information that you didn't have before.
That is fascinating.
So gratitude requires a literal, active inspection of the landscape of your life to uncover to whom thanks should be given. When a French speaker says, je suis reconnaissant, they are invoking a three-part psychological process.
Which is?
Intellectual recognition of the gift, willing acknowledgement of the giver, and emotional appreciation of the act. It's a complete recognition.
You are literally cognizing or perceiving the event in a completely different way than your default programming would allow. You're scouting your own life for the good.
Precisely.
And doing that kind of intellectual heavy lifting requires a massive amount of humility. You have to willingly abandon the myth of your own rugged self-sufficiency. I mean, in Western culture, we love the idea of the self-made person.
We really do. It's built into everything.
But this active lens of reconnaissance forces you to admit that you couldn't possibly be who you are without the unseen contributions of hundreds of other people. It forces you to look at the world and see that it isn't just a place of random cold cruelty. There are forces and individuals acting toward you with beneficial, selfless motives every single day.
Which is a beautiful realization, but as you mentioned, it requires abandoning the ego. And that brings us to the core utility of this emotion.
Right.
If it takes this much intellectual heavy lifting and humility, what is the actual measurable payoff? We know gratitude makes us more pleasant to be around, but how does this active cognitive effort actually alter our baseline biology and our level of joy?
Well, to understand the payoff, we really have to look at the mechanics of the happiness set point. Now, if you've spent any time in the personal growth space or listening to our deep dives here at the Book Nook, you are likely already familiar with the concept of hedonic adaptation.
The psychological treadmill.
Exactly. You get a promotion, you feel euphoric for a month, and then your brain normalizes the new salary and you drop right back down to your baseline level of happiness.
It's the genetic lottery of mood.
Yeah. And the research cited in the book breaks down the pie chart of human happiness like this. A massive 50% of your characteristic level of happiness is purely determined by genetics. You are born with a baseline set point.
Half of it. That's
Yeah.
wild.
Right. And then another 10%, and only 10%, is determined by your life circumstances, meaning your zip code, your marital status, your income, your health. All the things we spend 99% of our waking lives stressing over only account for a tenth of our overall happiness variance.
Because of that very hedonic adaptation you mentioned,
Yeah.
we adapt to the new house, the new spouse, or the new chronic pain much faster than we anticipate.
Exactly. But the remaining 40% of the pie is determined by what researchers call intentional activity. That is the space where we actually have agency. That 40% is our psychological workout room.
Right.
And Dr. Emmons wanted to see if gratitude could function as the ultimate intentional activity to hack that genetic set point. So he and his colleague, Mike McCullough, designed this brilliant, groundbreaking 10-week study to test this.
And this study really put gratitude on the scientific map.
It did. They took a large pool of participants and randomly assigned them into 3 distinct groups. Group 1 was the gratitude group. Their only task was to pause once a week and write down 5 blessings that had occurred in the past 7 days.
And what's crucial to note here is that these didn't have to be massive, life-altering events. The researchers noted that participants wrote down incredibly simple things like the generosity of friends, the right to vote, or simply waking up this morning.
Yeah, just basic things. Then Group 2 was the hassles group. They were given the exact opposite intentional activity. They were instructed to write down 5 daily annoyances or burdens that bothered them.
The things we normally ruminate on anyway.
Exactly. Things like hard to find parking or taxes, or my personal favorite from the study, burned my macaroni and cheese.
That is a tragedy, to be fair.
It really is. And then Group 3 served as the neutral group. They just recorded neutral daily events without applying any positive or negative emotional valence to them.
So what happened?
Well, throughout the 10 weeks, the researchers measured everything. Their subjective moods, their physical health symptoms, their exercise habits, and their overall life satisfaction.
The data that came back from this study completely shifted the field of positive psychology. The gratitude group wasn't just slightly more cheerful. By consciously directing their attention to 5 simple blessings once a week, they were a full 25% happier than the participants in the other groups.
25%, that's huge.
It's massive. They felt significantly better about their lives as a whole, and they scored much higher on scales measuring optimism about the future.
But the mechanism here isn't just psychological. It bled over into their physical behavior. The gratitude group actually spent nearly an hour and a half more per week exercising than the hassles group.
Oh, wow.
Think about that for a second. By spending 5 minutes writing down things they were thankful for, they naturally generated the internal motivation to care for their physical bodies for an extra 90 minutes a week.
The mind-body connection there is undeniable. But, as a rigorous scientist, Dr. Emmons anticipated the immediate pushback from skeptics.
Sure, you always get those.
Right. A critic might look at that data and say, well, of course this works for a bunch of healthy college students whose biggest weekly trauma is burnt pasta and a parking ticket. What happens when you apply this to people dealing with severe, intractable adversity? Does gratitude still work when your life is objectively falling apart?
And to answer that, Emmons replicated the entire study design with a profoundly different demographic. Adults suffering from neuromuscular diseases, specifically post-polio syndrome.
Now, for context, this is a severe degenerative neurological condition.
Very severe. It is characterized by progressive, unrelenting muscle weakness, chronic joint pain, and debilitating fatigue. These are individuals who have been dealt a profoundly difficult hand by life. Emmons asked them to do the exact same intentional activity, keep a gratitude journal.
And the results were just as robust. Compared to the control group of patients with the same disease, the participants who actively practiced gratitude showed significantly more positive affect and satisfaction with their lives.
Which is incredible on its own.
It is. But the most incredible finding was physiological. The gratitude group reported getting more total hours of sleep each night, spending significantly less time awake, tossing and turning before falling asleep, and feeling more refreshed upon awakening.
Let's drill down into why that happens, because it's fascinating. When you are ruminating on your pain or your anxieties, when you are in the hassles mindset, your sympathetic nervous system is engaged.
Right. Fight or flight.
Exactly. You are subtly in fight or flight mode. Cortisol is dripping into your bloodstream. But the cognitive act of gratitude acts as a biological downregulator. It engages the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. It literally quiets the nervous system.
Yeah. The book actually shares a touching, highly illustrative anecdote about this very mechanism. It involves a developmental psychologist whose 6-year-old daughter was suffering from intense nighttime anxiety.
Oh, the fear of the dark story.
Yes. She was terrified of the dark. Night after night, she would wake up in a panic, come into her parents' room, and disrupt the entire household sleep cycle. The child's sympathetic nervous system was in overdrive.
Just flooded with stress hormones.
Exactly. Finally, the mother, utilizing this psychological principle, suggested a new bedtime routine. She told her daughter to lie in bed and make a mental list of all the people who had done something nice for her that day, like a teacher who helped her, a friend who shared a toy.
And by forcing her brain to actively scout for goodness, by doing that mental reconnaissance we talked about, the child's anxiety dissolved. She fell asleep quickly. The act of feeling grateful literally functioned as a biological sedative.
It really did.
If you want to sleep more soundly, the neurological data strongly suggests you should count blessings, not sheep.
It perfectly illustrates that gratitude is not just a polite social construct. It is a physiological state. And if we know that gratitude changes our mood and downregulates our nervous system for better sleep, we have to look deeper.
Deep.
How deep do these physical changes penetrate into the actual organs of the body? What's fascinating here is the neurocardiology research.
Yes. Specifically, the work coming out of an organization called HeartMath. This blew my mind. They study the intricate communication systems between the human heart and the brain, primarily by measuring something called heart rate variability, or HRV.
Right.
Now, for the listener, HRV isn't just your heart rate speeding up or slowing down. It is a measurement of the microvariations in time between each individual heartbeat. It is a key indicator of your nervous system's flexibility and resilience.
Precisely. A high heart rate variability means your nervous system can smoothly transition between excitement and relaxation. When researchers at HeartMath hook participants up to EKG machines and ask them to consciously generate feelings of deep appreciation and gratitude, they observe something remarkable.
What happens?
The HRV pattern shifts into a highly efficient, coherent rhythm.
Okay, how would you describe that coherent rhythm to someone who hasn't seen the charts?
Well, think of a disorganized heart rhythm, the kind you experience when you are stressed, anxious, or angry, like an orchestra where all the musicians are tuning their instruments at the same time.
Oh, just a mess of noise.
Right. Everyone is playing, but it's erratic, jagged, chaotic noise. The EKG readout looks like a jagged mountain range. But gratitude acts as the master conductor. The moment a person feels genuine appreciation, the orchestra instantly aligns. The heart rhythm shifts into a smooth, rolling, sine wave-like pattern.
That's beautiful.
It is. This coherent state indicates that the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, and the immune system are all operating in perfect, synchronized efficiency.
And what's wild is that this coherent state is entirely different from the state of mere relaxation. If you are just lying on the couch, zoning out and watching TV, your heart rhythm is relatively disorganized. You are relaxed, but you aren't coherent.
Exactly. Relaxation isn't coherence.
But when you actively cultivate the lens of gratitude, your brain and your heart physically harmonize. You are optimizing your body's most vital engine.
And if you are optimizing your cardiovascular system on a daily basis, it logically follows that gratitude would have a profound impact on your overall lifespan.
It has to.
Which brings us to one of the most famous and elegantly designed psychological studies of the 20th century, the Nun study.
Directed by Dr. David Snowden. This study is the gold standard for longevity research because of the demographic. They studied nearly 700 nuns from the School Sisters of Notre Dame.
And from a scientific perspective, studying nuns is brilliant.
It is, because you completely eliminate the messy variables of normal human life. They all have the exact same occupation, they eat the same diet, they don't have the stress of marital histories or child rearing, they have identical sleep schedules, and they don't consume alcohol or tobacco. The baseline is perfectly level.
Exactly. With all those external lifestyle variables controlled for, researchers wanted to see what internal psychological factors influenced how long they lived and whether they developed Alzheimer's.
So what do they look at?
They went back into the convent's archives and pulled brief, one-page autobiographies that these nuns had written when they were 22 years old, right as they were taking their vows to enter the sisterhood.
So they analyzed the text of these essays written by 22-year-olds for idea density and, more importantly, for the expression of positive emotions. They counted the frequency of words associated with gratitude, joy, contentment, and hope.
Right.
Then they fast-forwarded the clock 6 decades. When these women were in their 80s and 90s, the researchers looked to see who was still alive, who was thriving, and who had passed away.
And the correlation they found was staggering. The nuns who expressed the highest quartile of positive emotions and gratitude in their writing at age 22 lived significantly longer than those in the lowest quartile.
Much longer.
The data showed that a baseline disposition of happiness and gratefulness can literally add up to 9 years to a human lifespan.
9 years. I want the listener to really internalize that number. To put that 9-year advantage in perspective, clinical data shows that heavy, chronic cigarette smoking knocks about 6 to 7 years off a person's life expectancy.
Wow.
So being chronically ungrateful, angry, and pessimistic is biologically worse for your long-term survival than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. That is a deeply sobering thought.
It highlights that emotions are not just fleeting clouds in the mind. They are biological events with cumulative long-term consequences. Lowering your daily cortisol through gratitude protects your telomeres, reduces systemic inflammation, and preserves your cardiovascular health.
And we see this acute physical impact mirrored in a study by Glenn Affleck on heart attack victims. Affleck studied patients who had just survived a myocardial infarction. He found that the patients who blamed others for their heart attacks, the ones who were consumed by resentment, anger, and the unfairness of it all, were highly likely to suffer another heart attack within 8 years. They were trapped in a state of high sympathetic arousal.
But the patients who engaged in what psychologists call benefit finding, the ones who used the terrifying brush with death as a catalyst to become more appreciative of their families, more grateful for each new day, significantly reduced their risk of a secondary attack.
The gratitude literally protected their hearts.
It is a visceral phenomenon, and here's where it gets really interesting. The book highlights a fascinating deception study that proves gratitude is entirely embodied. It is felt in the physical tissue of the body, not just displayed as a social mask on the face.
Oh, the nature film study.
Yes. Researchers brought women into a lab and asked them to watch various films. Half the women watched a pleasant, calming nature documentary. The other half were subjected to a gory, disturbing, highly unpleasant medical film. However, the women watching the gory film were instructed to lie. They were told to actively mask their disgust and pretend, using their facial expressions, that they were thoroughly enjoying the film.
So you have these women trying to fake positive emotion. The researchers then recorded videos of all the women watching the films and showed these videos to a panel of observers. The observers' job was to guess who was genuinely feeling good and who was faking it.
And how did they do?
When the observers watched the videos showing the women's full faces, they were terrible at guessing. Their accuracy was incredibly low. Why? Because human beings are remarkably adept at faking a smile. We can manipulate our zygomatic major muscles to look perfectly happy.
But the brilliant twist in the study is that the researchers then showed a second group of observers videos of the exact same women, but they cropped out their faces. The observers could only see the women's bodies from the neck down, just their shoulders, their posture, the tension in their hands.
And suddenly, the observer's accuracy skyrocketed. They could immediately tell who was faking the positive emotion. Because while you can lie with your face, you cannot easily lie with your body.
The body keeps the score.
Exactly. The text points out that gratitude, much like true enjoyment, is an embodied state. You feel it in the expansion of your chest and the relaxation of your shoulders, in the literal cadence of your breath. It is a full-body physiological shift.
So if we logically follow this thread, if a grateful heart literally beats with a different, more coherent rhythm, if it downregulates the nervous system, extends longevity, and completely alters our physical posture, we have to ask the next vital question.
Which is,
how does this massive shift in our internal biology alter our external reality? If you are a walking generator of coherent, grateful energy, how does that rewire the way you interact with the people closest to you?
it changes everything. It leads us directly into what the book explores is the social economy of gratitude. And anytime you bring up the science of interpersonal relationships, you absolutely have to talk about Dr. John Gottman.
Oh, absolutely. The Love Lab.
Yes. For those who might not know, Gottman runs the famous Love Lab at the University of Washington. He is legendary in the field of psychology because he can observe a married couple discussing a point of conflict for just 15 minutes, track their physiological responses and language, and predict with over 90% accuracy whether that couple's marriage will survive or end in divorce.
His methodology is incredibly precise. Couples come into his apartment-like lab. They are hooked up to heart rate monitors, sweat gland sensors, and microphones, and they are asked to resolve a disagreement.
Just a normal argument.
Right. And through decades of this research, Gottman discovered the mathematical secret to relational survival. It all comes down to a specific metric, the 5-to-1 ratio.
The magic ratio.
Yeah.
Gottman found that flourishing, deeply satisfying marriages, the ones that go the distance, maintain a positivity to negativity ratio of at least 5 to 1 during times of conflict.
Wait, during conflict?
Yes, even during arguments. Meaning, for every one negative interaction, every eye roll, every criticism or complaint, there must be a baseline of at least 5 positive interactions. 5 expressions of warmth, affection, and most importantly, appreciation and gratitude.
And the unsuccessful couples.
Marriages that are on a downward trajectory toward divorce usually have a ratio of less than 1 to 1. The negativity simply drowns out the connection.
And we have to understand why that ratio matters so much. Gottman identified that the single greatest predictor of divorce is the presence of contempt.
Contempt is a relationship killer.
It really is. Contempt is the toxic feeling that your partner is beneath you, that they are unworthy of your respect. It manifests as sarcasm, name-calling, or mockery. Contempt is so physiologically destructive that couples who exhibit high levels of it actually suffer from weaker immune systems and catch more infectious illnesses.
That's terrifying.
But gratitude is the exact, specific biological solvent that dissolves contempt. You cannot hold genuine gratitude for someone's contributions while simultaneously holding them in contempt. They are mutually exclusive psychological states.
The sociologist Arlie Hochschild coined a brilliant term for this dynamic. She calls it the economy of gratitude. She observed that when couples are trapped in endless, bitter arguments, they rarely think they're arguing about what they're actually arguing about.
Right, they think it's about the dishes.
Exactly. They think they are fighting over whose turn it is to take out the trash, or why the dishwasher wasn't unloaded, or who was managing the household finances. But Hochschild argues that beneath the surface, they are actually fighting over the giving and receiving of gratitude.
It's about feeling valued.
Yeah. When you bust your tail all day and your partner fails to acknowledge your effort, you feel culturally bankrupt in that relationship. It breeds deep resentment. But when appreciation flows freely, the chores stop being a battleground because both partners feel seen and valued.
Expressing gratitude doesn't just neutralize the slow decay of a marriage. It can be used to actively build profound, life-altering connections. Martin Seligman, widely considered the father of positive psychology, designed an intervention that perfectly illustrates the explosive social power of gratitude.
Oh, the gratitude visit.
Yes, he calls it the gratitude visit.
This was one of the most moving sections of the text for me. Let me describe how this intervention works because it requires an immense amount of courage. Seligman tasks his students and participants with writing a 300-word testimonial letter to someone who profoundly changed their life for the better.
Someone they have never properly fully thanked.
Exactly. It could be a former teacher, a mentor, a family member. But the catch is, you aren't allowed to just mail the letter or send an email. You have to arrange a face-to-face meeting with this person without telling them exactly why you are coming, and you have to sit down and read the letter out loud to them.
It strips away all of our normal social defenses. It requires raw, unfiltered vulnerability.
It does. And Dr. Emmons includes a true story in the book about this exercise that completely wrecked me. There was a young, tough, hip college student who was assigned the gratitude visit. He decided to write his letter to his parents.
Okay.
He wrote a beautiful, sprawling letter thanking them for all the quiet sacrifices they had made for him and for his younger brother over the years. But being a typical cool college guy, he was way too embarrassed to actually execute the visit. He thought reading it out loud would be too awkward, too sentimental, too cheesy.
Totally understandable.
Right. So he folded it up and kept it in his bag. But a few weeks later, over the Christmas break, his younger brother was tragically killed in a horrific car accident.
Oh my goodness. It is an unimaginable, world-shattering loss for a family.
Unfathomable. And that night, standing in the cold, sterile environment of the hospital emergency room, looking at his parents who were absolutely inconsolable, the student made a decision. He reached into his bag, pulled out that crumpled gratitude visit letter, and he read it to them right there in the ER.
Wow.
He shared in vivid detail how much he and his brother loved them, how much they appreciated every dinner, every sacrifice, every moment of support. He later recounted that reading that letter capped off the most significant, profound moment in the emotional life of his family.
I can't even imagine.
In the darkest hour of their lives, that expression of deep gratitude became a powerful capsule of love that gave them something to anchor to. It helped them survive the initial shockwave of the grief.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, That story, while heartbreaking, fundamentally highlights why gratitude is so essential to human survival. If we pull the lens back and look at it from an evolutionary biology standpoint, gratitude is the foundational building block of reciprocal altruism.
Reciprocal altruism.
Right, early humans could not survive in isolation. We needed tribes, we needed people to share food, to watch our backs, to care for our young. Gratitude is the evolutionary mechanism that forces us out of our own selfish, myopic worldview.
It binds us together.
It makes us view other people's actions with a trusting assumption of kindness. When you feel deeply grateful, you aren't just happy. You are heavily motivated to share the goodness you've received with others. It is the invisible glue that binds society together.
Okay, but this raises a massive, glaring question. If everything we've talked about so far is true, if the benefits of this emotion are this monumental, if we're talking about adding 9 years to our lives, optimizing our heart rhythms, saving our marriages from divorce, and providing a psychological anchor during profound grief, why aren't we all just walking around constantly blissfully grateful?
It's a fair point.
Why is it so incredibly hard to maintain this mindset? What is actively stopping us?
That is the million-dollar question for the human condition. And the answer is that the practice of gratitude is a swimming upstream against the powerful currents of our own biology and our own culture.
We're fighting nature.
We are. Dr. Emmons identifies several formidable enemies of gratitude that we battle daily. The first and most deeply ingrained enemy is our own brain chemistry, specifically the negativity bias.
The psychological principle that bad is stronger than good.
Exactly. Human brains are hardwired by millions of years of evolution for one primary goal: survival. If you are a primitive human walking through the savannah and you ignore a beautiful, awe-inspiring sunset, nothing happens.
Right.
But if you ignore a slight rustling in the bushes, you get eaten by a predator. So our brains naturally evolved to scan our environments for threats, annoyances, and problems. We are literally neurologically programmed to notice what is going wrong rather than what is going right.
Think about your own commute this morning. If you're like most people, your brain probably latched onto the one single driver who rudely cut you off in traffic. You probably muttered to yourself about it, maybe your heart rate spiked.
Oh, absolutely.
Meanwhile, you completely ignored the hundreds of other drivers who safely stayed in their lanes, used their turn signals, and respected your space. That is your negativity bias in action, hijacking your perception. So to practice gratitude, we had to manually override our own caveman brains. But the book points out that it isn't just our biology. It's our ego, too. How exactly does the human ego block our ability to be thankful?
It blocks it primarily through the mechanisms of narcissism and entitlement. A person with highly narcissistic traits has a remarkably difficult time experiencing true gratitude because they fundamentally believe they inherently deserve everything good that happens to them.
Oh, I see.
If you believe you are entitled to success, wealth, special treatment, and favors, then when you receive those things, you don't view them as gifts. You view them as the universe simply paying its debts to you.
Wow, that's a bleak way to live.
There's absolutely no room for thankfulness because there is no recognition of a gift. The goodness was already yours by right.
The book shares an interesting, high-profile anecdote in this section to illustrate this. Now, just as a quick impartial reporting note for our listeners, we're simply relating the book's examples here without taking any political sides. The text juxtaposes a story of Donald Trump long before his presidency, when his limousine broke down on a highway. A passing auto mechanic stopped to help him fix the car. As a thank you, Trump supposedly tracked down the mechanic and paid off his entire home mortgage. A massive act of financial thanks. However, the text contrasts that specific grandiose act with the broader psychological finding that highly narcissistic personality types generally possess a very low gratitude density.
Gratitude density is a fascinating metric. It refers to the number of different people to whom an individual feels grateful for a single positive outcome.
Give me an example of that.
For example, if a deeply grateful person gets a promotion at work, they might have a high gratitude density. They thank their parents for their work ethic, their mentors for guidance, their spouse for support, and perhaps God or the universe for the opportunity.
Spreading it around.
Exactly. A highly entitled, narcissistic person experiencing the exact same promotion will have a gratitude density of 0. They will attribute the success entirely to their own innate genius and hard work.
That makes perfect sense. The ego isolates you. And another ego trap the book mentions, one that I found genuinely surprising, is the danger of gratitude addiction.
Yes, the cautionary tale of Hans Selye. He was a pioneering, world-renowned researcher on biological stress. He actually concluded, after a lifetime of study, that gratitude was the ultimate aim of human existence.
So he was a proponent of it?
He was. But he got the execution tragically backward. He became addicted to seeking the gratitude of others. He desperately wanted the standing ovations, the academic adulation, the constant verbal approval of his peers.
He wanted to be the object of gratitude, the person receiving all the thanks, rather than the subject actually feeling the emotion of thankfulness.
Exactly. And Dr. Emmons warns that expecting or demanding gratitude from others is a massive roadblock to experiencing it yourself. When you perform acts of kindness or even just do your job specifically to be thanked, you are turning a relational gift into a cold transaction.
It's transactional, right?
And you are setting yourself up for bitter resentment when the thanks you receive inevitably fall short of your inflated expectations.
So we have to battle our evolutionary negativity bias, and we have to battle our own narcissistic tendencies. But honestly, even if we conquer our biology and our ego, we still have to wake up and fight modern culture.
That's the biggest battle.
The text explores how Western consumerism and the cult of victimhood actively, intentionally fuel ingratitude. There's a terrifying statistic in the book. By the age of 21, the average person living in the modern world has been exposed to roughly 1 million commercials.
1 million. Just let that sink in.
1 million. And what is the fundamental purpose of an advertisement? Every single one of those ads is meticulously designed by psychological experts to make you feel deprived. They are built to convince you that your life is inadequate, incomplete, and fundamentally flawed unless you purchase this specific car, this anti-aging cream, this new smartphone.
Advertising is the industrial manufacturing of discontent. It cultivates a permanent mindset of scarcity. It trains your active lens of reconnaissance to only look for what is missing.
And it doesn't just make us dissatisfied with our belongings. It hijacks our most intimate relationships. There's a classic, slightly older psychological study mentioned in the book that perfectly illustrates this toxicity.
A center-sold study.
Yes. Researchers took a group of men and showed them glossy centerfolds from Playboy and Playgirl magazines, highly stylized, airbrushed, unrealistic images of physical perfection. Afterward, these men were asked to fill out surveys rating their own wives and their marriages.
And the results were pretty depressing.
Very. The men who just viewed these idealized photos subsequently rated their real-world wives as significantly less physically attractive. They reported being less satisfied with their relationships overall, and they expressed a lower level of commitment to their marriages.
Theodore Roosevelt famously said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." We could update that to say comparison is the assassin of gratitude.
Oh, that's good.
When your attention is constantly drawn to unrealistic, curated ideals, whether that's a magazine centerfold in the 1980s or an influencer's perfectly filtered Instagram feed today, you aggressively depreciate the value of what you actually have.
Now, interestingly, the study noted that when women were shown photos of male models, it didn't negatively impact their feelings toward their partners in the same statistically significant way.
That is an interesting gender difference.
It is, but the broader, essential point remains absolute. A culture built on constant consumerist comparison starves gratitude to death.
Okay, so consumerism, narcissism, and our own brain wiring are constantly pushing us toward ingratitude on a normal, average Tuesday. But what happens when life actually does become terrible?
Right.
How do people maintain gratitude when they are facing true, objective tragedy? Because let's be real, telling someone who just lost their career or who just received a terminal cancer diagnosis to just be grateful feels incredibly insulting and dismissive.
It is insulting, and it represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what the practice of gratitude actually is. This brings us to the profound paradox of suffering. True, deep gratitude often requires the contrast of pain.
The contrast is key.
We appreciate the warmth and life of spring precisely because we have endured the bitter, dead cold of winter. Sometimes human beings only recognize the immense value of a blessing once it had been threatened or forcefully taken away.
The book spends time discussing Elie Wiesel, the Nobel laureate and Holocaust survivor. This is a man who endured the unimaginable horrors of Auschwitz and Buchenwald. He emerged from what he hauntingly called the kingdom of night.
He lost everything.
He lost his family, his youth, his entire world. And yet, if you read his work or listen to his speeches, he spoke constantly, almost obsessively, of gratitude. How is that psychologically possible?
Wiesel taught that gratitude isn't a passive emotion reserved only for the good times, when the sun is shining and everyone is healthy. In the face of profound evil or suffering, gratitude is a fiercely defiant act.
A defiant act. I love that.
It is an act of rebellious remembering. It is a refusal to let the suffering, the oppressors, or the tragedy strip away your fundamental humanity. Defiant gratitude looks at the darkness and says, "You can take my home, you can take my health, you can inflict pain upon me, but you cannot take my internal capacity to recognize goodness, to remember love, and to give thanks for the breath I still have."
Defiant gratitude. It shifts it from a passive feeling to a warrior stance. It aligns perfectly with the psychological research of Dan McAdams discussed in the text.
What did he find?
McAdams studies life narratives, how human beings construct the stories of their own lives in their minds. He found that highly productive, deeply resilient adults do not ignore their pain. They don't engage in toxic positivity or pretend that bad things didn't happen.
Right, they don't just sweep it under the rug.
Exactly. Instead, they cognitively construct what he calls redemptive sequences.
Redemptive sequences.
They do the hard work of actively extracting meaning and eventually gifts from their tragedy. The redemptive twist in their life story doesn't erase the original pain. The pain remains real. Rather, it gives the person agency over the narrative.
They choose how to frame it.
They choose to find the opportunity for growth hidden within the ashes. They become grateful for the specific ways in which the painful circumstances force them to deepen their compassion, build their strength, or reevaluate their priorities.
But this raises a really tricky practical question.
Yeah.
How do we actually do this in real time? If a friend is grieving or if we are in the middle of our own crisis, how can we tell ourselves to be grateful when every cell in our body feels awful?
This raises an important question, and the short answer is we can't tell ourselves how to feel,
Yeah.
and we shouldn't try.
Okay.
Brother David Steindl-Rast, a Benedictine monk and a leading scholar on the philosophy of gratitude, offers some profound wisdom in the text that clears this up. He clarifies the vital distinction between feeling grateful and being grateful.
Feeling versus being.
Feeling grateful during a sudden, traumatic tragedy is absurd. You do not and should not feel grateful for a devastating diagnosis or a fatal car crash. That would be pathological.
Right.
But being grateful is entirely different. Being grateful is a consciously chosen posture toward life as a whole. It is a fundamental underlying attitude that remains stable regardless of the fluctuating weather of your emotions.
So you are essentially living out a gratefulness that you don't necessarily feel in the acute moment.
Precisely. By choosing the posture of gratefulness, by deciding to remain open and receptive to the world, rather than closing off your heart in bitterness and cynicism, you create a container. And eventually, as the acute grief processes, you begin to actually feel the gratefulness that you have been faithfully living. It is a daily discipline, not a spontaneous emotional reflex.
So what does this all mean for us practically on a Tuesday morning? If gratitude is a chosen posture and a rigorous daily discipline, rather than just an automatic reflex when someone hands us a gift, what is the exact workout routine?
Right, how do we actually do it?
How do we build this neurological muscle? Dr. Emmons concludes the book with 10 actionable practices for grateful living. But instead of just mechanically listing them off 1 through 10, let's look at how they fit together, because they really fall into a few distinct buckets.
I like that approach.
Let's start with the practices that involve shifting our physical environment and our bodily state.
That's a great way to categorize them. Our minds are incredibly forgetful and our negativity bias is strong, so we have to hack our environment. One of the practices Emmons highlights is using visual reminders.
Which sounds super basic.
This sounds incredibly basic, but it is neurologically vital. Put a Post-it note on your bathroom mirror, set a daily alarm on your phone labeled gratitude pause, or keep a specific object on your desk. We need environmental tripwires to interrupt our default anxious rumination and force our brains into that active lens of reconnaissance.
Another deeply physical practice he mentions comes from Dr. Frederick Luskin, called the breath of thanks. This is so simple but so powerful.
Walk us through it.
You just pause whatever you are doing, slow down your nervous system, and on 5 slow, deliberate exhalations, you silently say the words, "Thank you." You aren't even necessarily thanking anyone for anything specific. You're expressing gratitude for the sheer, improbable gift of breathing, for your physical existence.
It immediately reconnects the wandering, anxious minds back to the present body.
Which reinforces the concept we discussed earlier. Gratitude is an embodied emotion.
Another bodily practice Emmons suggests is to simply go through the motions. This ties directly back to the idea that attitude change often follows behavior change, not the other way around.
Right.
There is a famous psychological study where participants were asked to hold a pencil horizontally in their teeth. Doing so forces the facial muscles into the exact mechanical shape of a smile. And remarkably, just by forcing the physical posture of a smile, the participants reported feeling genuinely happier.
Fake it until the emotion catches up.
Exactly. Don't wait for the warm, fuzzy feeling of gratitude to strike you like lightning before you act. Write the thank you note anyway. Say the words out loud to your spouse anyway. The physical action paves the neural pathway, and the genuine feeling will eventually follow the action.
Okay, so those are the physical triggers. The second bucket of practices involves completely restructuring our internal cognitive baseline, how we think and speak. Obviously, keeping a gratitude journal is on the list, but Emmons adds a massive caveat. To avoid gratitude fatigue, where journaling just becomes another boring chore, you have to get hyper-specific.
Specificity is the secret sauce. If you just write, "I'm grateful for my spouse," every single day, your brain will adapt to it and stop producing the dopamine and serotonin response.
It just becomes white noise.
Instead, write about a specific, tiny detail. "I am grateful that my spouse woke up 10 minutes early to scrape the ice off my windshield so I wouldn't be cold." That level of specificity forces the brain to genuinely re-engage with the memory, maximizing the emotional payoff.
Another cognitive practice that blew my mind, because it sounds completely counterintuitive, is to remember the bad.
It does sound contrary to the whole premise, but it is essential for setting up psychological contrast. To fully appreciate where you are right now, you occasionally need to vividly remember how hard things used to be.
Give us an example.
Reflect on a past illness you recovered from, a terrifying period of unemployment you survived, or a toxic relationship you managed to escape. When you remember the darkness of the past, the baseline, mundane reality of your present suddenly looks incredibly bright and full of grace.
To structure that reflection, the book introduces the Japanese psychological technique of Nikon. This is a meditative practice that asks you to reflect daily on 3 ruthlessly simple questions. What did I receive from others today? What did I give to others today? And what trouble or difficulty did I cause others today?
Oh, those 3 questions are brilliant because they brutally dismantle the ego. They ground you in stark reality, remove the illusion of narcissistic entitlement, and force you to confront your deep interdependence on the people around you.
And wrapping up the cognitive restructuring, Emmons is adamant about watching our language. The words we use externally literally shape our internal reality.
They absolutely do.
If you constantly walk around using the language of scarcity, talking about what you need, what you lack, how tired you are, and what is unfair, you are hardwiring your brain for chronic resentment. We have to consciously police our vocabulary and intentionally deploy words like gift, blessing, abundance, fortune, and privilege.
The final bucket of practices involves relational commitments. Emmons suggests making a formal vow to practice gratitude. When we commit to an action out loud in front of witnesses, our psychological adherence to the practice skyrockets. It becomes a matter of personal integrity.
You're holding yourself accountable.
And for those inclined, learning establish prayers of gratitude, regardless of your specific religious or secular background, allows you to lean on the ancient wisdom of traditions that have perfected the litany of thanksgiving over millennia.
The very last practice is a challenge. Think outside the box. Once you get good at thanking your friends and family, push the boundaries of your appreciation. Can you find a way to be genuinely grateful to your enemies for what their friction has taught you about your own patience?
That's the advanced level right there.
It is. Can you be grateful not just to the people who help you, but grateful for the people you are serving, because they provide you with the profound opportunity to exercise your own compassion and purpose?
It is about expanding the perimeter of your active lens until it encompasses your entire life.
We have covered some massive life-altering ground today. So what does this all mean for us? To me, it means that gratitude is a conscious, sometimes incredibly difficult, but absolutely necessary rebellion. It is a rebellion against our biological default settings, against a cynical and consumerist culture, and against the isolating walls of our own egos.
That is a perfect synthesis of Dr. Emmons' work.
Thanks.
It is essential reading for anyone who is feeling overwhelmed, cynical, or burnt out by the relentless pace of modern life.
Which is almost everyone.
It provides rigorous, undeniable scientific proof that we are not helpless slaves to our circumstances or our genetic set points. We hold the cognitive power to literally rewire our physical hearts, to alter our nervous systems, to extend our lifespans, and to deepen our relationships simply by shifting our attention to the gifts we already possess.
If you are the learner, If you are someone who actively wants to escape the endless treadmill of hedonic adaptation, who wants to actually slow down and enjoy the achievements and the relationships you've worked so hard to build, this deep dive is your scientific permission slip.
Absolutely.
It is permission to stop looking frantically for the next big thing and to start looking closely at what is right in front of you.
And as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over in the days ahead.
Let's hear it.
We live in a culture that absolutely worships independence and the myth of the self-made individual. But true gratitude requires us to admit a terrifying truth, that we are deeply, profoundly, and permanently dependent on others. Are you brave enough to surrender the comforting illusion of your own self-sufficiency in order to experience the true, messy, beautiful joy of being connected?
That is a beautiful and challenging thought to leave us with. Thank you for joining us in the Book Nook today. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a deep dive into the books that change our lives. And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one. See you next time.